So one of the first things I see when someone begins to lose weight is a reduction in joint pain. And this reduction is disproportionate to the amount of weight loss. What I mean is that intuitively it would make sense that after about a 5% weight loss, you would see about a 5% reduction in joint pain. But for a lot of people, after about a 5% weight loss, there is between a 50% and a 100% decrease in joint pain. And it really seems that the larger and more unhealthy someone is, the more reduction in joint pain comes along with weight loss. So what's the mechanism behind this? I find this mechanism absolutely fascinating because it actually could be stemming from the liver. And now obviously there's a myriad of things that could be contributing to this, but one really interesting one is actually the liver. One of the reasons holding excess body fat begins to deleteriously harm our health is because we begin to deposit fat in and around our organs, and this is referred to as visceral fat. And the main organ is going to be the liver. And when we deposit fat in the liver, we increase the production of different molecules that promote inflammation. And these molecules can actually bind to the DNA of liver cells and increase the production of what are called matrix metalloproteinases. And these are abbreviated as MMPs. And what's beautiful is these MMPs are actually used to break down damaged tissue. And typically these MMPs are balanced by what are called TIMPs. And TIMP stands for tissue inhibitors of matrix metalloproteinases. And it's simply just to turn these MMPs off and stop them from destructing tissue when it's not important. These MMPs actually work to break down collagen tissue in the liver and in the joints. In the liver, when we begin to get healthy, this tissue can be replaced by functional liver cells. And in the joints, the broken down collagen is simply just replaced by extra collagen tissue. But when the liver begins to develop visceral fat and begins to increase the production of inflammatory mediators that subsequently increase the production of MMPs, we don't have enough of these inhibitory TIMPs to actually stop the MMPs from causing too much damage. And now the liver regenerates extremely quickly, so when these MMPs are elevated, we simply just continue to lay down collagen tissue. And this collagen tissue is actually liver tissue that isn't useful, so we have a reduced capacity of the liver, but these MMPs are also released into circulation and begin acting at the level of the joints. When the liver is producing a lot of these MMPs, they're released into the systemic circulation and can act at the level of the joint. And now a normal level of MMPs will break down collagen tissue at the joints, and then this collagen tissue is subsequently rebuilt. And this collagen tissue doesn't have nerves in it, so when two joints with collagen tissues at the end cap rub together, we don't feel any pain. But when we don't have this collagen tissue, we expose nerve cells that when they get rubbed against begin to cause joint pain. But this all stems all the way back around to excessive inflammation at the liver. And one of, if not the biggest driver of liver inflammation is going to be excessive visceral fat. But what's so beautiful is that visceral fat actually contains a lot of cortisol receptors. And this may sound scary, but this could be both good and bad. And this is also why stress could actually increase joint inflammation and pain. What cortisol does is it causes fat cells to release their stored fat molecules called triglycerides. And it does this by breaking the triglyceride into its components, which are 3 fatty acids and glycerol. And the glycerol is turned into glucose and used for energy, and the fatty acids can be directly used for energy. And the other function of cortisol is to actually increase the uptake of both glucose and fatty acids. And now typically we will release cortisol in response to a physical stress, meaning we have a higher energy demand, and this increase in free fatty acids will actually be used as energy. But if we have a psychological stress, we do not have an increase in energy demands, but we still have an increase in the uptake of these free fatty acids. So these free fatty acids are then just repackaged back up in triglycerides and stored as fat. And this happens all throughout the body, at the muscle, liver, subcutaneous fat, which is the fat underneath your skin, and visceral fat, which is the fat around your organs. But because of the high density of cortisol receptors at the visceral fat, they seem to be extremely greedy and uptake a lot more of the fat out of circulation. So we begin to accumulate a lot of visceral fat in response to psychological stress. But in response to an energetic stress, like exercise or weight loss, these free fatty acids are actually uptaken by the muscle tissue and used as energy. And the density of cortisol receptors simply just increases the amount of free fatty acid release at the level of the visceral fat. But instead of the visceral fat sucking them right back up, they're sucked up by the muscle tissue. So this fat around the liver will release its stored fat very readily, but unless there is some sort of force driving that fat into the muscle tissue to be used as energy, there is a disproportionate re-storage of that fat back into visceral fat cells. So in summary, through this complex series of mechanisms, the first 5 to 20 pounds of weight loss will disproportionately come from visceral fat. And this reduction in liver fat will drastically decrease the amount of inflammatory chemicals floating around our bloodstream, which subsequently decreases the amount of protein-degrading matrix metalloproteinases that we are producing, thus giving both the liver and the joints the correct balance of protein-degrading and protein-building enzymes. Therefore, we not only can heal the liver, but also heal arthritic joints that are simply under excessive degradation and not enough rebuilding. With that being said, I know there were a lot of mechanisms, and I did my best to explain them as simply as possible. But if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to leave them in the comments or message me personally.